So you're left with a nice and easy chip like this, but you go and duff it just in front of you, or you go and thin it through the green. Let's simplify it. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today I'm going to talk you through chipping, the most common mistakes I see golfers make when chipping, and a way that we can simplify it, talking through setup, club selection, and why the chip is not a full swing. It's not a long swing, it's got its own swing. So as always, I'm not going to talk a load of complicated words to you. I'm going to keep it super simple for you to take out onto the golf course and easy to remember when you're out there practicing. Before we get started, if you enjoy my videos and want to be the first to see more like it, then hit that subscribe button and make sure your notification button is turned on. It'll really help me and the channel, and it'll also mean you'll never miss another video. So make sure you hit subscribe, and thank you so much. Okay, so there's three main points to this video. And number one being, why is a chip not a full swing? Why has it got its own setup, its own technique? And basically, it's pretty much obvious. It's a very short shot. It doesn't require much body movement, but so many golfers get confused and assume it's the exact same kind of setup and technique. We're going to go into that in a lot more detail, but I really need you to understand that this is its own shot. It requires different clubs, not like an iron or a mid-iron or water driver. It requires a wedge, and we're going to talk through club selection shortly. Again, it's a super short shot. It doesn't require a super long swing, and that's what I see so many golfers doing, trying to merge a full swing in with this, but it just overcomplicates it. It actually makes your confidence go out the window, because that's when you're going to thin it, you're going to top it, it's just not going to be nice. And I hear so many people with the yips when it comes to chipping because they don't know how to change the technique, they don't know what clubs to use. So I'm going to talk you through every step of the way. As well, we've heard of a pitch shot, and again, a lot of people get confused with where does a pitch shot come into this. Is a pitch shot the same as a chip or a full swing? That's a different shot altogether. That's got its own setup, its own technique, its own purpose. But today is about chipping, not a full swing, not a pitch shot, the chip shot. Section number 2 is all about the setup and the technique for a chip shot. But before we get into that, let's understand what a chip shot actually means. And for me, a chip shot means it's the shot that spends a lot of the time on the ground. So it pops up in the air and then it's going to run to the hole. So it's not like a pitch, which travels a long way to the hole, stops quite quick. It lands just on the green and rolls up, which I'm going to show you a few examples of shortly. But let's get into the setup, because the setup should stay pretty much the exact same. And at the end, I'm going to show you a bonus tip when it comes to clubs, to how you can use every tool, every club in your bag, but the same technique. So where do we start with setup? Setup with our chip shots. I'm using a standard 54 degree for this, just to show you how I would set up and how I would advise you to do. So we've got a nice short chip here, probably around 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, around 5 to 10 yards just from the green. So I'm using my 54 degree. From here, I want to take my ball position. So ball position needs to be back of the stance. So back of the stance like this. If we're too far forward, then that's when we're going to be having some swing implications. I will talk you through that shortly, but for now, let's just have the ball position back in our stance. From there, we need that weight distribution. So we need our weight ever so slightly forward like this. So we're saying 60% forward, 40% back. That's going to allow the club to naturally work on that pendulum. But from there, we need to feel that the club lays ever so slightly forward, not too much like you see a lot of golfers do, and not too far back, because it's all about using the bounce of the club. And the bounce is this part here. So if I lay this club flat to the ground, we can see we've got this gap between me and the club. So we want to allow that bounce to stay the same. We don't want to be scooping, so we don't want to be using the lead edge, and then we don't want to be chunking. We don't want to be chunking that down into the ground. So this is where a thin comes from, and this is where a chunk comes from. Either those two are going to cause so much heartache on the course. So avoiding those two, setting up every time, again, it's going to allow you to maintain that bounce, and it's going to allow the club to just glide off the ground like we want it to. And then from there, we just need to stand closer to the ball. So again, it's not like a full swing where we're standing this distance away. We need to bring the club in closer like this. So it's what we call heel down, toe up. Okay, and what that does, that allows the club to work almost straight. It allows you to control the club, and it produces such clean, consistent, straight shots. And as we stand close to the ball, we're just going to drop our hands down the grip like this. Again, you can see I've got my hands quite close to my body just because it requires a pendulum motion. It doesn't require a long swing. There's no need for that separation. So we've got our ball position back in our stance. We've got our weight shifted forward like this. We're standing nice and close to the ball. We've got our toe down, our heel up, and then all it requires from there is our technique. So how does the technique change? And basically all it requires is our shoulders to rock, our body to stay as one. You can see my knees are working in the same kind of motion. We're not required to make any wrist hinge now. We're required to keep the hands pretty quiet. The arms, the shoulders are all going to work as one. So I really like to feel that my belt buckle is working halfway back, halfway forward, not like we would with a full swing. We're making that full turn. We've got all that power. We've got all this room to bring the club up wide. Now we're keeping our body very quiet. So how the club wants to make contact with the ground, it's pretty much as we've just mentioned before. We want to maintain this angle. We don't want any kind of forward pressure like this, and we don't want the club leaning back. So we really want to be conscious of making still that brushing motion here. So we don't want to be hitting the ground too far back, nor do we want to be hitting the top of the ball. So we want to be creating that lovely brushing motion. Again, using the bounce as it was in the setup. We're not forcing it now, and we're not forcing it back. And that's super common. I see so many golfers on the golf course because when I was growing up, you know, I've watched and I kind of learned the way of hands forward. We want to kind of produce this forced chip shot, and as you can see, it just creates this downward blow. The leading edge digs into the ground. It looks very similar to something like this type of motion, and as you can tell on the golf course, that gets pretty frustrating. Yeah, it might work, but a lot of the time it's pretty inconsistent. You're digging into the ground. If you're playing on a wet day, it's raining, that club's going to dig. And again, if you're playing a links course, the ground's super dry, it's not going to be nice. And then the opposite, I see a lot of golfers trying to help the ball up, scooping it up like this. You can see there's a lot of wrist action. It's not going to be nice. Now, that technique sounds far too good to be true. It sounds too easy, but if you can get that setup and technique the same and consistent every time, then you're going to be producing amazing chip shots. I've got a super easy drill that you can do, and it just requires a towel or even pinching your clothes, anything that's going to almost feel like it's a barrier under your arms. What you want to do, pop your towel under your arms like this. Okay, from there, I want you to make your chip in motion, but keeping the towel under your arms. So I see a lot of golfers this type of motion or the opposite, trying to scoop up. So if you can keep this towel underneath your arms throughout, this is going to give you a really good idea of how the chip shot should feel. You should feel like it's a pendulum. We don't want this type of angle. We don't want the butt of the club to be pointing towards the flag like this. And most definitely, we don't want the butt of the club pointing backwards. So really feeling the butt of this club just stays pointing to our lead pocket like this, and that's going to allow us to rock our body as one, keep everything working in a smooth motion, and from there again you're going to be producing really nice chip shots. Let me give this a try. I'll take that on the golf course. Now, if you can perform that drill even without a ball, even just feeling that pendulum movement of the club, then you're going to have, again, really nice, consistent chip shots. So why are you someone that duffs your chip shots? And the reason being, again, we're using the bounce, we're using the leading edge. If you're someone that duffs it, your leading edge is digging into the ground like this. That may be because your setup looks like this, or you're just trying to get too quick, too snappy with it. So your club is digging into the ground. It can be very frustrating. Sometimes, again, you might actually miss the ball, but most of the time it'll just pop up in front of you and it won't go very far. But then if you're someone that thins the ball, your ball just absolutely travels way too far through the green, you're working the opposite. You're trying to help the ball up in the air. The leading edge is getting caught with the top of the ball. It's going to thin, it's going to go a country mile. So why is that? Again, as you get the ball, you're scooping it, you're either leaning forward. It's not going to be very nice. So the top of the club works along the ball. It creates that very sharp, fiery motion. So again, if you can have that consistent setup, really feel that the arms, the body works as one, keeping the butt of the club pointing to our lead pocket like so, you're going to create those lovely consistent chip shots. Section number 3 is all about club selection, and this is the beauty with chipping. If you can have the same setup, the same technique, it doesn't matter what club you use, because you can use a 7-iron to chip, or you can use a 60-degree wedge. Depending on the distance that you've got for the ball to travel, you can use pretty much any club in the bag. So why would we use a 60-degree, but then why would we use a 7-iron? So a 60-degree I would use in a situation where you've not got much room for the ball to roll out. So you can see here, I've got quite a big slope. So the slope probably starts about, top of the slope's there, with the bottom of the slope, and then the distance between the hole and the slope, it's not great. But there are more severe situations than that, and that's where your 60 degrees is going to work really well, because it's going to pop up and it's not going to roll as far. Then we've got something like a 54 degree. That's something that I tend to use a lot of because it's my trusty club. I've used it time and time again, so I know that works for me. And then you've got a pitch and wedge. So pitch and wedge, it's going to run slightly longer. So it's going to probably jump and then run pretty much halfway. So you can imagine between me and the flag, I'd probably land it about halfway and it's going to roll. But then we've got a 7-iron. So a 7-iron is going to act like a putter. So it's going to literally need a little bit of lift to get to the front of the green, and then it's going to roll the rest of the way. The 7-iron is such a hidden gem to use when it comes to chipping, because it literally runs like a putter. Not many people know that they need to use it, but for me, if there's no obstacle in the way, why would you go high? You don't need to. Get your 7-iron out. It works a treat every time. Golf is super hard. We don't need to make it any harder. So if you can work through clubs and try these shots out and really try them out for yourself, get creative, you're gonna find easier ways to make these shots, these hard shots, simpler. Okay, so now I'm going to go through every single club, starting with 60 degree up to 7-iron, showing you the difference in the ball flight and just how I would play them on the golf course. So again, ball position back, weight forward, standing nice and close to the ball. This is going to pop up and it's not going to roll as much. Very nice. Okay, so for me there, that wasn't the club. It was going to require quite a lot longer of a swing, and that's not for me what I would do from here. So I'm going to use my 54 degree now. Again, exact same setup, slightly less of a swing. Okay, that worked very nice. Again, 54 is what I tend to use a lot of on the golf course because it's my kind of trusty club. However, now pitch and wedge. As we mentioned before, this is going to run halfway. So I'd say land this halfway and then it's going to run the rest of the way. Again, exact same setup. Let's see how this goes. Good. Okay, required probably a little bit more of a swing. That was more like a 7-iron shot, but you could see it doesn't require much effort at all. And now finally the 7-iron. This is such an amazing club to chip with. I just don't know why more people don't use it. It's so simple. It runs like a putt. It lifts ever so slightly off the ground. We're going to be landing it probably about here. Let it run the rest of the way. Okay, bear in mind this is going to roll a little bit right to left. So moving this a little bit right. Again, exact same setup. Get up. Like a treat. It's so easy. Get your 7-iron out to chip with, I promise. It'll never fail you. What I'm trying to prove to you here is it's not one glove fits all. You don't have to use one club for the shot or the yardage. As you can see, working through all these clubs, it produces a very similar outcome for all the clubs that are here. It requires the same setup, the same technique, a slightly different length in the swing. But if you're someone that likes to pop the ball up high, you use your 60 degree. For me, I like to go in between. I like to see it run up. I like to see it pop up as well. So I like to stick to my 54, but it's super important to understand that there's so many different clubs that you can use from the one spot. Get creative, get out there and work it for yourself. You might find you'll stick to your 7-iron everywhere you go. You might find you'll stick to your pitch and wedge. That's absolutely fine. Get creative, find what works for you. Don't stick to what you've been told or what your friends do on the golf course. Everything works out different. So that is from start to finish, some of the biggest mistakes I see with golfers and chipping, and how you can fix it, how you can simplify it, how you can work through every club in the bag, the setup, the technique, and why is a long shot so different to a chip shot. Again, if you love this video, I really appreciate it if you press subscribe. There's so many amazing videos on the way, so remember, hit subscribe, don't miss out, and I'll see you in the next one.